the human hierarchy, the drives are all part of that matrix that works on the inside of each one of us. So let's talk about the aspect of the hierarchy, especially Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Now, the book talks about this aspect of it, that it really has never been what we call a validated motivational theory, and that there's some difficulty between the esteem, belongingness, and how it all sits. I frankly disagree. The aspect of the physiological and safety needs, those are total needs within the individual person, and you really cannot go as a person expect to motivate somebody when they have a poor housing condition and you're sitting there trying to talk about all the wonders of work. They're just trying to get by on the bare necessities of life. So pay attention to the reality is that if somebody is struggling at the physiological level or just the safety level, they have a problem making their house payment because you're too cheap as an employer, you need to pay attention and stop talking about joining a bowling group after work with all the other employees. Pay attention to the needs. Now, you'll have some people, they'll interpret their esteem needs differently and they'll flip them a little bit about belongingness and so on. Some people are driven in the aspect, so this is not necessarily universal, but applies to almost every aspect of humanity in the aspect of trying to fulfill different needs. The Maslow hierarchy of needs, what it says pretty much is that when there's an unmet need, let's say, for instance, that you look into physiological and somebody's starving to death or they just want to breathe as they go through, you may have dreams and aspirations of a brand new vehicle that you've been dying for in a certain color. And lo and behold, something goes awry and you find that somebody is holding your head underwater and you're about to die any second because you're going to drown. Now, I guarantee you, you will forget all about that car that you wanted and that luxury interior and everything else, because the only thing you care about is getting your next breath. Your physiological need will dominate all the esteem needs, belongingness needs, the self-actualization, anything else, because that is foremost and paramount right now that needs to be met. The same thing applies to each level of the needs as you go up. So we look on the aspect of what needs to be done on the hierarchy. This is the most widely recognized motivational theory. And yes, we do have some people, especially on the esteem, whether it's social esteem or self-esteem, they'll reinterpret that aspect of it. But other than that, and one or two studies that claim it disproves it, but the reality is I have two, because I believe that we're all unique individuals and interpret the 5 levels over here. Once upon a time, as a graduate student, I disagree with my professor, and I had to throw out a 75-page paper 2 weeks before the end of the semester and rewrite the whole thing because I disagreed on the aspect of Maslow, because I believe Maslow really is a little bit different interpretation for each one of us. And now that you're seeing the authors agreeing the same thing. So with that, motivations, there's 2 major ones, and people are very different how they're motivated. A lot of times people like the work. They like to sit down and they like to sit down and self-reward themselves. They have an intrinsic motivation, and then other people have an extrinsic motivation. It's interesting watching dialogue about, but they're arguing between which is more powerful. People are different and they're motivated differently. Stop trying to categorize them. You have to pay attention. One time I had an executive director and I had a weekly meeting with her. So as the vice chancellor, so she would come into my office and I would have my weekly meeting with her. It was her birthday though. So I went out and they bought a cake. I brought her department in. And so we had everybody crammed into the office, had 14 people in the office, and we sang happy birthday to her. And she blew out her candles on the cake and everything. So, and then everybody left and she says, "Can I have a word with you?" And I said, "Sure." So everybody leaves and she closes the door behind everybody else. And then she sat there and she shakes her finger at me. "Don't you ever do that again. I hate public recognition. I hate birthdays. I hate celebrating that. I don't need to be embarrassed." I says, "We weren't embarrassing you. Everybody is happy for you. Regardless, I hate public recognition." Gee, the extrinsic motivation isn't there. She likes having a quiet pat on the back, although you can't pat anybody in the back nowadays. She likes to have that quiet word of recognition rather than having anything public. She is fully motivated by intrinsic motivations. Great employee. That's one area that I never saw coming because I thought everybody enjoyed recognition, and it certainly wasn't her. So don't argue about the extrinsic versus intrinsic. Some of your introverts, they like to sit down and not make any public recognition, and they just like to come into work. And a lot of them love doing the job that they do. sit down and talk to them individually and each one of your employees and find out what motivates them and just ask them the question. If I wanted to really reward you because you did something awesome, what would be the coolest thing that could possibly happen? And they'll tell you. This is called communication, talking to employees, making certain you are on the same page with them, and then you stop talking and you listen to them. My mom told me, she says, David, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth. You ought to listen twice as much as you talk. And of course, I'm a college professor, so I can't keep, I have to talk. But that said, pay attention and listen to the people around you and find out what motivates them. Now, there's people that really have a couple of really powerful things within them. The learned needs theory, needs can be strengthened or weakened or learned by self-concept, norms, or past experience. This is the value imprinting that we go with before the age of 20. There's 3 learned needs studied in research. One is the need for achievement. That aspect of it, there are some people, they like to sit down and go off on their own. They don't want to even have anybody helping them as a team. They prefer to do things on their own. They like to accomplish goals. They like feedback. Tell me what I'm doing right or wrong. They like to have a raise every once in a while. What are the risks involved? They want to have some type of some internal recognition of the fact that they have achieved. It drives them continuously. You'll see a lot of people in management that want to climb, and sometimes it's not necessarily a need for power or even affiliation. Sometimes it's an internal checklist they have inside their head that I need to get to the next level. And they put this check mark as they go through because that's important to them. Sometimes people will sit there and do things for approval from others. They'll conform to others' wishes. They'll just do anything to avoid conflict just so they can sit down and get by and enjoy hanging with people and enjoying that moment of camaraderie as somebody's part of a group. And if they can rise in that process and have a higher level, they like that too. So we have the need for achievement, and we notated as NACH, and then same with for affiliation. And then there's power. There are people out there that love power. Yes, and they seek power for social, personal purposes. One time, it was interesting, as a graduate student many years ago, I was in a class for my MBA, and it was in the Metro Detroit area. So you had all the auto industry people, and we're going to the school in the MBA program, and we had people competing in class to be chair of a committee. This is the class. It is just the class, and there was competitions. I want to be chair of this committee. No, I want to. So we had to have a formal vote in the classroom to elect a chair. There's no money involved. There's no glory involved. It's just they couldn't help themselves. They had to have that need for power to be in charge of a committee. It's a committee in the classroom, but for them, that was important. It's powerful and it's built into people. The expectancy theory, this is interesting in the aspect of it's a reinterpretation of what we just said by a different author, and this may speak more to you than a previous one, but there's an expectation of performance, and then performance to outcome, and then the anticipated satisfaction. So if I do this, I'm going to sit down and have a positive performance level. I'm going to hit this level, and then I can have this outcome. So this is really a reward system you go through, but the reward, that thing we call the balance, every one of us is different as to what we expect. Remember what I told you about the gal with the birthday cake? For her, her balance would be the internal satisfaction of sitting at the end of the day, pushing back from her desk and saying, or somebody coming by, nice job. That was really good work. I really liked it. Thanks, take care. That's all she needed, and for her, that was enough. Somebody else, so-and-so, they earned this certificate because they did this. They could do exactly the same project, but for them, getting that extrinsic reward would be very vital because that's the balance that they want, that anticipated satisfaction from the outcome that they experience. So pay attention to what it is. Hire trained staff to adjust the job duties. So over here, if you do this over here in your experience, then you're going to have this type of performance. Train them what you're expecting out of the performance. and then measure the performance accurately. And a lot of times our evaluation process isn't very good. So pay attention to how you're evaluating them and that they're doing the things you want them to do, and then reward them appropriately. Sometimes you have to sit down and break out of the thing of everybody gets a 3% raise this year. Okay. Sometimes you got to say, well, you did fabulous. You got a 7. And by the way, you over here, you're not so good. You get a 1% or maybe nothing. And maybe you need to start getting resume ready. Anyway, so increase the outcome balances, make certain the rewards are valued. Sometimes if you want to have a personal recognition, take an employee out to lunch, giving them a certificate, or just popping in the door and saying, thank you, nice work. It just depends as to what the person is looking for. So pay attention to Maslow. Regardless of the book, and even though my personal viewpoints on it, it is an excellent theory because you have to pay attention to the fact that everybody has their hierarchy of needs, and those needs need to be met before you go on to a higher level. Intrinsic motivation, understand what motivates a person, intrinsic or extrinsic, internal or external rewards. The learned needs of achievement, affiliation, and power as to what people like. They're looking at the expectancy, leads to performance to outcome, and then the outcome to a final reward. The human hierarchy, it really is, if you understand this, you're going to have a great deal of success in your rise to leadership within your organization and understanding the people that are all around you. Take care.